Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 139, July the 22nd, 2017, Saturday. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay, so it's been basically, if it's TowerGate day 139, that means it's been approximately 141 days since Trump sent out that tweet that he was being wiretapped. That was my Watergate moment. That's when I said to myself, hey, I think Trump is serious. I don't think he's joking. And if he's telling the truth, and I thought this through, and I thought, for a presidential administration to be surveilling a opponent of the opposing party in a presidential election is unprecedented. It would be bigger than Watergate, using the resources of the law enforcement and intelligence community to spy on or eavesdrop or surveil a presidential candidate of the opposing party in an election. That would be extraordinary. That would be criminal beyond anything we've ever seen before. It's what Richard Nixon would have dreamed of. It's what he would like to have been able to do that he was not able to do, but is actually something that Trump was stating was actually happening. Now, here we are 139 days later, or actually probably 141 days since Trump's tweet, and we now know that Trump was telling the truth. But not just that he was telling the truth, that he was being surveilled, but we know it's much, much larger than that. Yes, of course he was being surveilled. We know that now. We know that there was surveillance on Trump and his team. We know that the conversations were unmasked. The only question now is, was there a probable cause to do so? And that will only come out if, in fact, they actually want to get to the bottom of it and have some hearings, and actually get Susan Rice and Samantha Power and Loretta Lynch and John Brennan and Comey and all these people, and actually put them under oath in a court of law with a judge and a jury where they are criminal defendants, and force them to tell the truth. We'll see if that happens. But the bottom line is that we know that there's something much larger going on, and that just the wiretapping is only just one part of a much larger operation of a deep state coup, which is obvious to anyone who's paying attention at this point and can even have a bit of objectivity. It's pretty obvious that this is much, much worse than what Trump initially tweeted about him being wiretapped. So, as you know, yesterday I did a video where I brought up a Daily Caller article where they lay out a timeline, and the author of the article suggests that the evidence tells him that there's some sort of a political operation going on to sabotage Donald Trump's presidency, of which I agree. But as you know, I disagree on the fact that he stays with the narrative of the Russians being the ones who hacked the DNC, the DCCC, what have you. See, I disagree with him on that. So I agree with him on his final analysis as to what is going on, but I have some disagreements with the official narrative. But I like the way that he laid out a timeline and showed some things that gave us a different perspective on what we're looking at here. So, as promised, I've put together my own timeline where I figure in a few things into the timeline that he doesn't figure into, and I get away from the Russian narrative, which I don't believe. I believe Seth Rich or someone else was probably the ones responsible for penetrating the network at the DNC and the DCCC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out my timeline for you, and then I'm going to offer my analysis of what I think is actually going on here that is all part of the bigger picture of the deep state coup. But I want to get down into some of the details that dispels some of the Russian narrative and actually plays more into what I think really happened. Now, most people, when they look at these, try to analyze the situation that we're looking at now, they like to start with the hacking or the WikiLeaks releases or what have you. But I think to understand this situation fully, that we need to go back even farther. We need to go back to the very beginning of the presidential campaign, which actually began in the fall of 2014. It was in October of 2014 when the Republicans and Democrats began their debates, and when TV commercials started running, and when the real political season began. So I'm going to offer a different perspective now that goes away from the Daily Caller piece. and focuses a little bit more on Seth Rich. Now, Seth Rich had been working for the Democratic National Committee since early in 2014. So he'd been working there maybe a little bit less than a year at this time when the political season began, beginning with the debates. Now, anyone who was watching the Democratic primary, as I was, understands from the very beginning that there was something going on there between the Democratic National Committee, the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the left-wing media. It was pretty obvious that they, from the very beginning, were pro-Hillary and anti-Bernie. It was pretty obvious at the beginning that they were doing everything they could to promote Hillary Clinton, while at the same time either just not talking about Bernie, or when they did, saying something negative. They wouldn't show you any of the footage, really, of those tens of thousands of people at Bernie rallies. What they would show you is doctored video of Hillary speaking in some high school gymnasium where she could barely draw a couple hundred people. Most of them were paid. So it was pretty obvious to the Democratic National Committee that with Hillary Clinton, as has always been the case throughout her career, that the more that you see of her, the less you like her. The longer she hangs around, the more her numbers drop. She had a gigantic lead over Bernie Sanders at the beginning, but even with all the efforts that they made to sabotage Bernie Sanders, he still damn near beat her. They had to actually go through the entire California primary, which was really, really rigged. So, it's obvious to everyone that the game is being run on Bernie Sanders. And we knew that from the very beginning, because when there was fights for weeks and weeks and weeks over the debates. Bernie wanted more debates, more high-profile debates, wanted debates to be at times where people could actually watch them. The DNC was wanting debates that would happen, that they only wanted 6 debates, and they got what they wanted, only 6 debates, that they would have those debates at the same exact time that there would be very, very major sporting events going on, such as the playoffs, the World Series, the beginning of the NFL season. So they scheduled every one of these debates to be the exact same time as a major sporting event, and they only scheduled 6 debates. They also had quite a bit of limiting where you could go with the debates. They only wanted to focus on certain things and not really talk about the things Bernie would like to talk about. And of course, that's because they were setting up Hillary Clinton to run the same campaign her husband ran 2 times, which is to put herself as the centrist and to paint Bernie Sanders as a wacky socialist. This is exactly what the plan was, to marginalize Bernie and promote Hillary. Now, here you have Seth Rich. He's a Bernie Sanders supporter, a true progressive, who is the director of voter analytics, data analytics there at the DNC. He is actively working on multiple programs tracking things regarding voting within the Democratic National Committee, within the Democratic system. And he is finding within a lot of these programs that he's running that tracks people who are being denied the opportunity to vote, or certain things going on, shady deals going on, changing voting locations, sending out false emails to false voting locations, various other things. A lot of things were going on that he realized probably were being generated from within the Democratic National Committee. This probably triggered Seth Rich to saying, wait a minute, I work for the damn DNC, and here we are. They are rigging this thing against my guy, Bernie. And my guess is that Seth Rich got very upset and decided he had no choice but in the name of fairness to try to right this wrong. So I believe it's at that point that Seth Rich began to think about what he could do to try to even the score, if you will. I think he began probing that system very early on to look at certain types of data, to get certain types of information that possibly could shine the light on the corruption that was going on, that was being used against the candidate that he passionately supported. So I think that this is the place where we need to start to understand this story. It should also be noted that in May of 2015, Kim.com appeared on Bloomberg TV and he stated that WikiLeaks would be releasing information that would be damaging to Hillary Rodham Clinton. This was in May of 2015. So at this point, that would be about 7-8 months after the primary started. Plenty of time for Seth Rich to have probed that system, found out the information that he thought would benefit his cause and even the score, and to probably get some of that information downloaded. Whether or not he had dispersed it or not at this point is unclear, but it appears that maybe he had dispersed it to someone, because at this point, in May of 2015, we have Kim.com telling Bloomberg that WikiLeaks has got some damaging stuff on Hillary Clinton. So this would all fit perfectly. So now let's jump to 2016. In the month of June, actually early in the month of May, May 3rd actually, Trump secures the nomination mathematically. That's when Reince Priebus actually came out and said, okay, Trump's going to be the GOP nominee. So now Clinton and the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, they know who they're going to be running against: Donald Trump. At this very same time, Fusion GPS, which had been doing opposition research for a Jeb Bush, well, we believe it was a Jeb Bush donor, to get information, opposition research on Trump, had decided they no longer needed his services. Now keep in mind, Fusion GPS had been doing this work for this big Republican donor, who we assume was a George Bush or a Jeb Bush supporter. They gave this information to this donor, but for whatever reason, it appears that the Jeb Bush team decided not to use the information for whatever reason. Maybe because it was salacious, maybe because it couldn't be verified, but for whatever reason, they decided not to use it. Now, it's been leaked or rumored that after that happened and Jeb Bush left the race, that they went to Ted Cruz and offered some of this information to Ted Cruz. It's believed that Ted Cruz's campaign looked at it and that they too rebuffed it and said, yeah, this is some pretty interesting stuff, but we don't probably think that, yeah, we think we're going to, let that go. So apparently the Ted Cruz campaign was not interested. But once Donald Trump wins the nomination, Fusion GPS decides, what they're going to do next. Clearly, the people running Fusion GPS, and we'll get more into them later, were anti-Trump, and they had an interest in seeing Trump lose, so they wanted to continue with what they had, but they decided now they needed to go find a big Democratic donor to keep paying that $12,000 to $15,000 a month, plus expenses, possibly even more, to continue putting together this opposition research that could be used to destroy Trump and benefit Hillary Clinton. So this process is carrying out early in the month of June. Now, on June the 14th, the DNC releases a statement that their servers were hacked. Very next day, June the 15th, a hacker identifies himself as Guccifer 2.0, steps forward and claims responsibility for the DNC hack. He affirms what the DNC statement said and claims to be the source for WikiLeaks. The first 5 documents released are purposely tainted with Russian fingerprints, and the very first document that he releases is a Trump opposition research document, which is making the first released more damaging to Trump than to Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. Also, this causes some damage to the image of WikiLeaks and their credibility. At this time, after the DNC goes public, we know that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security both requested to analyze the servers, and the DNC denied those requests. Now, following the DNC announcement, the Washington Post filed a story which exactly followed the DNC statement, pretty much word for word, backing up pretty much what the DNC said. No real investigation, just basically saying what the Democratic National Committee statement had said. And right after the Washington Post piece, we get the New York Times publishing a similar story, but in their story, the New York Times adds to the story that the DNC knew about a hack as early as March or April of 2016. Now, the New York Times follow-up story that the DNC had hired CrowdStrike to analyze their servers within 24 hours of the date of the hack. And the date of the hack is believed to be April the 30th. Now, doing some research into this, what you find out is that CrowdStrike didn't just come on board with the Democratic National Committee or the Hillary Clinton campaign on this particular date after this hack. In fact, the relationship with CrowdStrike and the DNC goes all the way back to 2012 because they did the opposition research on Mitt Romney and the Romney versus Obama 2012 campaign. And we know that CrowdStrike had been around the premises of the DNC and had been in communication with people within the DNC much earlier than that. Now, about the same time, in early May, or middle of May, the DNC donor began funding Fusion GPS for opposition research. Now, on May 1st of 2016, one day after being hired, CrowdStrike declares that Russia was behind the hack. So literally within 24 hours, we're told, within 24 hours of the CrowdStrike being called in, they've already found the source of the hack, which is not very believable. Now, sometime in May, Rob Goldstone sets up this meeting with Donald Trump Jr. to meet with Natalia Veselnitskaya. Now, during this time, once Mr. Goldstone sets up this meeting, and there's about 3 or 4 weeks time from the time he set up the meeting to the time that the meeting actually occurred, Mr. Goldstone takes a trip to Russia for several weeks. He travels around Russia, he takes a lot of video, a lot of pics, he posts them on his Facebook and his Instagram, including one big picture with his big smiling face showing his t-shirt which says Russia. Now, some things about Veselnitskaya. We know that she is connected to and had worked with previously on other occasions with Fusion GPS. And we also know that her translator, who we talked about, this Anatoly guy, her translator was also worked for a group called Meridian, which is a George Soros funded group that gave strategic foreign policy advice to the Hillary Clinton State Department. He also worked as a FBI translator. He was Veselnitskaya's translator in this meeting with Donald Trump Jr. So here we have a Hillary Clinton State Department operative, former FBI operative, being the translator for Veselnitskaya. Yet we're told that she was there to give information that was negative about Hillary. Just doesn't add up, does it? Next, we have CrowdStrike. Let's get familiar with CrowdStrike again. The co-founder of CrowdStrike is a Russian, basically. His name is Dmitry Alperovitch, and we know that the CEO of that company is Sean Henry. Now, Dmitry has connections to the Democratic National Committee, again, back as far as the Obama-Romney election in 2012. Dmitry is also on the board of the Atlantic Council. Now, if you're not familiar with the board of the Atlantic Council is a George Soros-funded operation, which primary objective is to get rid of Vladimir Putin, to take him out, and to put the Atlanticists in charge in Russia. The purpose being to bring Russia into the orbit of the European Union and into the West. They're basically a bunch of pro-Western, pro-EU, socialists, Marxists, globalists, part of Soros Group, part of Google, part of all these people, the Clintons and all these people, New World Order crowd. That's who they are, and they're actively working day after day to try to cause disruptions, chaos, and other political issues within Russia to bring that country down, to bring down Putin. So this is what Dmitry Alperovitch likes to do in his spare time when he's not rigging American elections. He's rigging Ukrainian elections, rigging Russian elections, and anything else he can do, working there as the co-founder of CrowdStrike. Now, the number one man, who's the actual CEO who runs the operation at CrowdStrike, Sean Henry, is a former FBI counter-intel officer. We should also note that, of course, as I mentioned, the Atlanticist organization is also funded and very closely associated with George Soros and Google executives. The Atlantic Council donated $10 million to the Hillary Clinton campaign. Also, in 2014, they awarded Hillary Rodham Clinton the Distinguished Leadership Award. Should also be noted that Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google, is an investor in CrowdStrike, a huge Hillary Clinton supporter who openly supported Hillary Clinton. We should also note that the former Google executive Stephanie Hannon, who was Hillary Clinton's chief technology advisor. So you can see the very close connections between Hillary Clinton, CrowdStrike, and GPS Fusion. Because former GPS Fusion co-founder Peter Fritsch and his wife both donated to the Hillary Victory Fund. Huge supporters. Definitely anti-Trump all the way. And the other partner, Glenn Simpson, was an anti-Trump, anti-Putin, and before joining Fusion GPS, he did opposition research for a former Clinton White House operative. So apparently Mr. Simpson's relationship with the Clintons goes back pretty far. Now in June of 2016, Christopher Steele, who was employee of Fusion GPS, makes the claim that Hillary Rodham Clinton and the DNC hackers were paid by Trump's team and the Kremlin. Steele was paid $250,000 for his lies. Now let's get back to the timeline. On June the 9th, Donald Trump Jr. meets with Russian lawyer and 6 other people. Trump's lawyer recently commented that Rob Goldstein has ties to Fusion GPS. Now Goldstein says that he set up the meeting because this Russian pop star that he manages, his father, who's a Russian real estate oligarch, apparently worth $2 billion and is connected to the Kremlin or what have you, wanted this meeting to happen, and primarily because they're pushing this Majinsky Act, wanting to overturn the Majinsky Act. Why in the world Mr. Goldstone used the lie that they were going to get damaging information on Hillary Clinton can only lead to, you can only come to one conclusion, is that that was only done for the purpose of putting it in the email so that it could later be used to damage Donald Trump. That is the only possible conclusion that you can come to. Of course, we know that Natalia Veselnitskaya. Now, also another thing, Trump Jr. says he didn't know who he would be meeting with. He didn't know it would be a Russian lawyer or who it would be. Goldstone disputes that. He says that Trump Jr. knew it would be a Russian lawyer with association with the Russian government. So that'll have to be, we'll have to learn what the truth is on that. At this point, we don't know. But there's certainly a conflict as to that. But we do know who Veselnitskaya is associated with. We do know who Mr. Goldstone is associated with. Both of them associated with GPS Fusion. And we know what their goals were. July 14th, 2016. Oh, actually, let me go back to one other thing. Yeah, let's just keep going. Okay. July 14th, 2016, Democratic National Committee makes an official statement that Russia hacked its network. So as we can see, it only took about a week after Fusion GPS comes on board. Didn't take that long, and we start seeing the Russia hacked the DNC narrative being formed. Now that leads us to July the 10th of 2016, almost exactly a year to the day from when Donald Trump Jr. meets with Veselnitskaya. We have the murder of Seth Rich, July the 10th, 2016. And then we get Seth Rich's parents going on TV about a week to 2 weeks later, doing a TV with a local TV station, in which case they make the statement that they had recently learned just before Seth Rich was murdered, they had learned from Seth Rich that he was going to be leaving the DNC and going to work directly for the Hillary Clinton campaign in New York. Obviously, Seth Rich never made it to New York to work directly for the Hillary Clinton campaign because he was murdered shortly thereafter. Then in May 2017, which skips quite a way because we're going now from July the 10th, 2016, we skip into May of 2017. Kim.com offers to testify in the U.S. to Congress. Actually, I think I skipped something here. Nope, I didn't. Okay, so May 2017 comes about, and we get Kim.com, who offers to testify in the U.S. to Congress that Seth Rich was the leaker. Assange retweets Kim.com's posts. Then, on July 9th of 2017, here just about 2 weeks ago, we get Disobedient Media publishes a report by a forensic investigator that the DNC computer was hacked locally. Since then, we've had over a dozen other analysts, independent investigators, have looked at his analysis, and they have verified his report as being correct. This person has identified himself as the forensicator. Assange has retweeted the forensicator's report. And the initial report, which was given to Adam Carter, an independent journalist, after the forensicator's analysis of the NGP van file, has posted that on his site, and you can go there and see that. If you would like, just type in Disobedient Media into your Google search, and you will be able, or Yahoo or whatever you use, just type in Disobedient Media. You can go there to the website. You can click on Adam Carter's blog, and you can go there and read the entire report, as well as other analysts who have commented on the accuracy of that, and they have come to conclude that in fact his analysis is 100% correct, that that there was no hack into the DNC, or if it was a hack, you want to call it a hack, it was done locally, not from outside the DNC, but within the DNC itself, probably downloaded to a flash drive. And he gives the reasons for that, which I've covered in a previous video. But the bottom line is that all roads lead back to the Clintons. The Clintons are connected to Fusion GPS, to CrowdStrike, to the DNC, to the CIA, with Director Brennan being a Hillary's puppet, with Obama, Loretta Lynch, Bill Clinton being the person who gave Loretta Lynch her career. Of course, James Comey, who has defended the Clintons and their associates in lawsuits for many years favorably. So I go in a different direction from the Daily Caller piece, where the Daily Caller likes to stay with the Russian narrative. I don't believe the Russian narrative at all. I believe that Seth Rich, what actually happened here was that Seth Rich had become aware of what was going on, and so he decided to try to even the score, try to make things fair, try to get some justice in the system, because he was angry, and he was in the position to do so. Remember, he was a data analyst, analyzing and working on programs showing all these issues that were going on. At the same time, it's openly known by anyone paying attention that the DNC, the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the main body of the liberal media, meaning all three of the networks and PBS on network news. You had the cable stations, MSNBC, CNN. You had the New York Times, the Washington Post. You had the big online media, the Daily Beast, Mother Jones, and all these sites that liberals love to go to. You had them all playing the same game. Beat up on Bernie, ignore Bernie, accuse Bernie of this, accuse Bernie of that, do not show the crowds he's speaking to. Instead, focus all your positive attention on Hillary Clinton, despite the fact that she didn't talk to the media for 288 days, despite the fact that she couldn't draw more than a couple hundred people. Despite all these things, this is what was going on, and it probably infuriated Seth Rich. And I believe that Seth Rich probably began to probe the system to find some information that he might be able to get his hands on, that he could release, that might shine the light of truth onto the corruption that was going on within his party and in the very organization that he worked for. And remember, Seth Rich was a true believer. He was a true believing progressive person, loved Bernie Sanders, and just simply couldn't sit there and do nothing, knowing especially he of all people was in position to actually do something. And I believe that that's exactly what he did. Now, I believe that the DNC became aware of the system breaches probably as early as February or March of 2016, and so they called in CrowdStrike. And I believe at that time that what happened with Lucifer 2.0 is that Lucifer 2.0 is not real. Lucifer 2.0 is a persona. I believe he was created by CrowdStrike. And I believe the purpose in doing so was that the DNC stepped back and looked at the situation. CrowdStrike looked at their servers and said, oh man, you guys, we're looking at these files. We're looking at your FTP server. We're looking at these file transfers. Unless you've got a very good explanation for why these files were transferred to a flash drive or to some other type of source, unless you can explain why these files were transferred, you've got someone who's in here transferring files. You might want to take a look at these files and see what they say and see who might be interested in getting their hands on these files, because someone's transferring these files onto a device from within your organization. Bingo. At which point, the Democratic National Committee, the Hillary Clinton, and her people get around with CrowdStrike, sit around, scratch their heads, and go, okay, what do we do? They said, well, this shit's going to be coming out. How do we fight against it? Well, we can try to turn their tables. We can do a couple things. They can do what intelligence agencies usually do when information comes out that they don't want getting out. They simply flood the airwaves with a mass amount of fake information so that the real information gets caught up with all the fake information, and they can then go out and debunk all the fake stuff that they put out, and therefore the little bit of true stuff that came out gets debunked along with it. If most of it had no credibility, then all of it has no credibility. So this is when they set up this, I believe they set up this persona, this fake Guccifer 2.0, to start releasing this information. Because look at what was released. What was the first thing that was released? The Trump opposition research file. And after that, all that other stuff wasn't terribly damaging. So the stuff that was coming out from Guccifer 2.0 was not terribly damaging, and the stuff that Seth Rich had probably been downloading had not yet been processed or received by WikiLeaks yet. It would be. The Podesta emails and the other stuff would eventually be processed and released by WikiLeaks, but at this point, it had not. So they began the process very early with CrowdStrike. They said, hey, let's set up a fake hacker. Let's make him out to be a Russian. Let's put out a bunch of fake information under Guccifer 2.0, and let's attribute it to the Russians and WikiLeaks. This way we can discredit, we can blame the Russians, and we can discredit WikiLeaks. So when WikiLeaks actually does start releasing the real files, that whoever hacked the DNC, whoever hacked us, when he starts releasing that stuff, we will have already associated WikiLeaks and Julian Assange as being Russian agents working for the Russians, trying to take down Hillary, and that not to trust WikiLeaks and Julian Assange because he's putting out stuff that was hacked by the Russians, and it's all a bunch of garbage. This is what I think happened. I think Guccifer 2.0 was created by CrowdStrike. I don't think he's real. I think he was set up. He's a fake internet persona. He doesn't exist. Set up by CrowdStrike as a diversionary tactic to try and damage Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, and eventually Donald Trump will be tied to this as the story moved forward. Once Fusion GPS comes on board, I think that that's the role that they play. I think they come in with their political tactics and say, okay, now we got to tie Trump to Guccifer 2.0, or tie Trump's people, Roger Stone, to WikiLeaks, tie Trump to WikiLeaks. We give WikiLeaks a black eye. We present this fake Russian hacker. We say this fake Russian hacker is feeding stuff to WikiLeaks. We now discredit WikiLeaks, and then we tie Donald Trump to both. I think this is the operation, that exactly how it happened. I believe this. I don't have all the information I need to prove this, but I believe if we ever get to the bottom of this rabbit hole, I believe that we are going to find that that is exactly what happened, and I think that we're going to find that the Clintons are at the very bottom of it, as usual, because if you look, all roads lead to the Clintons. They are connected to Google. They are connected to who is connected to Fusion GPS and CrowdStrike. They are connected to the DNC. The Clintons are connected to Brennan. They're connected to Lynch, to Comey, to Obama. They're connected to every single bit of it. And if you have been watching my videos for a very long time, you know that going back to my very first 2 or 3 videos, I said that when we get to the bottom of this, if we ever get to the bottom of this, we will find that this is a Clinton operation. It smells like a Clinton operation. It stinks like a Clinton operation. And if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a damn duck. Fusion GPS brought in her works with Hillary Clinton and the DNC and the Obama administration and the deep state in order to destroy Trump's presidency, because once they got this narrative going and once the WikiLeaks, the real documents that Seth Rich likely leaked, began to come out and real damage started being done, and then you get, and Hillary Clinton, of course, ends up losing. Donald Trump wins the election. At this point, now they got an even bigger problem, because they now realize that Hillary was supposed to win, but she did not win. And now they got a big problem, because they know that eventually Trump's Justice Department, his FBI, eventually these people are going to look into these things and get to the bottom of them, and the Clintons and all their friends of the deep state are going to be tied to this, and a lot of them could be going to jail. A lot of them from the Obama administration, Comey, these guys are all caught up in it. Jarrett, Loretta Lynch, John Brennan, GPS Fusion, Christopher Steele, the people there at CrowdStrike. You notice that nobody from GPS Fusion, Glenn Simpson certainly doesn't want to testify in Congress. Nobody from GPS Fusion wants to testify. Two reasons for that. Number one is because their lawyers are probably telling them not to, because they're probably going to have to testify as defendants or certainly witnesses in the case that's being brought by Mr. Guvarev against BuzzFeed and Christopher Steele. So they know that they're probably going to get caught up in that. They don't want to have to go up here in Congress and say something or have some conversation come up that might cause them problems with their defense in the other civil lawsuit. And also because that when questions begin getting asked of Mr. Simpson and GPS, we're going to find out that they had a lot more to do, a lot more going on. They were a lot more involved. They were much bigger players than what we can realize now. They did much, much more than just contact Christopher Steele and have him put together this opposition research. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm telling you, GPS is probably the ones, GPS Fusion, along with, and I believe it was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is credited with being the one who brought them in, I believe, and she is, of course, like this with Hillary Clinton, so I can believe that Debbie Wasserman Schultz doesn't do anything without Hillary Clinton giving her the thumbs up. So I think that what we would learn, if we could actually get GPS to testify, if we could put them in a room and get them onto a lie detector, I think, and if we ever get to the bottom of this and actually get to the bottom of this rabbit hole, we are going to find out that Fusion GPS is a lot more involved in this political operation than what we know right now. Right now, it's just, they are the people who were hired as a third-party opposition group to get this research, for opposition research for the Democrats or Hillary Clinton or a donor or whatever. No, 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 no. We are going to find out that the relationship between Hillary Clinton and the partners there at GPS was going on even before the hacks, before the leaks. They've probably been working as an operative even before that. And we know that their connections are just too close for them just to have been brought in at the last minute. And we know that the type of work that they do, and the fact that Mr. Simpson himself worked previously for the Bill Clinton administration for one of his political hacks, we can assume that the Simpson knows the Clintons. We can assume that these people who run Fusion GPS know the Clintons very well, and we can assume that they were probably in the shadows working like people like them do, and probably have a lot more to do with what's going on in this deep state coup, as well as creating this Russia-Trump narrative. I believe it was probably CrowdStrike that dealt with the situation of discrediting WikiLeaks and creating the false persona of Guccifer 2.0 to try to counter what they knew was going to be coming out. But I think it was GPS, when they came into the equation, they're the ones that probably came up with the plan, hey, while we're at it, let's tie Trump to it. This is what it looks like to me. And the goal, of course, is to destroy Donald Trump's presidency. So, again, as I said at the beginning of this video, I am speculating on this. It's not complete fantasy. There are certainly enough facts that we have in front of us now after 139 days of TowerGate. We have enough facts we know enough things that we can come to some sort of a objective analysis as to probably what happened. But we need to get more information to be able to really prove what I just said. But I believe that if I'm looking at this objectively, I'm given this information that I just imparted to you, and much more information I cannot fit in this video, but information, much of it's been covered in other videos. If I'm just sitting back as an objective analyst looking at this and you ask me what does it look like to me, that is what it looks like to me. It looks like that Seth Rich, someone on the inside, which we can believe at this point was Seth Rich, is a Bernie Sanders supporter. He realizes his guy's being screwed. He gets angry. He goes in and tries to find something to even the score, some information he can release that might bring about even up the score or make the game more fair for his candidate. Because remember, this thing was still going on. This primary was still going on. It wasn't decided. Bernie Sanders was drawing huge amounts of support. At this point, when Seth Rich was killed, Bernie Sanders was at the height of his campaign. And Hillary Clinton was hiding from the media. And, of course, we were hearing about these hacks and these leaks. And at this point, I think that probably what happened was Seth Rich decided to go ahead and pull the handle. He probably thought about it for a while. Probably late in the fall of 2014, he was looking at it. In 2015, finally, he just gets fed up, decides there's no way that they're going to beat the system, and that his guy is going to get screwed, and that he owes it to himself and his supporters to at least disclose the truth, even if it destroys the party or does damage to the party or whatever. He wants to punish the Democratic National Committee. He wants to punish the left-wing media. He wants to punish Hillary Clinton and her campaign for what they're doing to his Bernie Sanders. And so he begins doing his work. DNC discovers that their system's been breached. They have CrowdStrike in there. CrowdStrike determines, hey, there's nothing you can do. The damage is done. We can look at the FTP server and see that the files have been transferred. We have an idea what those files are. We have an idea what those files are going to say. You've got, remember, these people are intelligence people. They come from the intelligence community. And so they look at it and go, okay, here's what we do. We turn the tables on them. First of all, we flood the media with all kinds of leaks of stuff that don't add up to anything. Then we create a fake persona, in this case Goose for 2.0, to be the guy who's creating and leaking all this stuff. Then we have him come out and publicly admit that he is the DNC hacker, that he's Russian, working with the Russians, and that he's given this stuff to WikiLeaks. This discredits WikiLeaks, so that when the real shit comes out, he's discredited. And you can say, yeah, but he got that stuff from the Russians. And the Russians, who knows, that could be fake stuff or whatever. So anyway, this is what it looks like to me. It looked like it was a response to the fact that they knew they had been hacked. And I think that they also began immediately investigating as to who may have been the person on the inside who accessed that FTP server and downloaded those tens of thousands of files. And when they saw that those very files that were hacked or leaked or taken, downloaded from their servers, began to show up in the WikiLeaks releases. Then we have Julian Assange going on TV in August to the Dutch TV station and saying, hey, he drops his stuff about Seth Rich. He won't come out and say Seth Rich was the leaker, but he does everything but say that. Then he goes on to Megyn Kelly on Fox News, does 2 nights interviews with her, does the exact same thing, gets on Sean Hannity's radio show and TV show, and continues to do the same thing, while we have Kim.com retweeting Julian Assange's talking about Seth Rich and how leakers have a lot to be fearful of, and drawing questions as to exactly who's responsible for the murder of Seth Rich, why he was murdered, and of course Julian Assange the entire time denying he has any association with Guccifer, denying he has any association with the Russians, the Russian government, Russian hackers, or anything like that. So it looks clearly to me like what happened there was that CrowdStrike was brought in to try to deal with the fact that Seth Rich had penetrated their system, gotten damaging information, and was going to release it. That was their play. Guccifer 2.0 is a fake persona. He doesn't exist, my friends. That's my belief. And of course, they bring in GPS Fusion, who takes a look at the overall situation, and they do what intelligence people do. They try to confuse the situation, muddy the water, change the perception, and so they decide also, probably, hey, you know, why don't we try to go ahead and paint Trump? You know, we have this association of possibly Roger Stone with someone who knows WikiLeaks or Julian Assange. Some even suggesting that Stone knows or have talked to Assange personally. Let's tie Donald Trump to WikiLeaks, who we've now discredited as being someone who receives documents hacked by a Russian hacker. And then I think once they got it to that point, everyone else just piled on, in the deep state, and the media, and everyone else. They said, wow, this is great, this Trump-Russia collusion. Then I think that they did exactly what intelligence agencies do. I talked the other day about sheep dipping with Lee Harvey Oswald. This is exactly what intelligence agencies do. They create situations like this meeting with Trump Jr. and the Russian lawyer. Didn't hear anything about it back in June because it wasn't ready to be dropped. You don't hear about a lot of these things. Jeff Sessions talking to this Russian ambassador, Paul Manafort having some business dealing with the Ukrainian president doing work for him. You have all these events. Some of them were actual events that really happened, and alone on their face, they're innocent and there's no crime or no wrongdoing or no intent. It had nothing to do with an election. Then you have other events that are created that are like this meeting with Trump Jr. This was a setup. You have many other setups, probably some that are still in the can that have not even been released yet. So that when you start, once you get the narrative out there of Trump-Russia collusion with WikiLeaks, with Stone, with Manafort, with this Russian oligarch, with this criminal banker from Russia, with this Ukrainian president, you get all this stuff going, and then all those little things that you set up months and months ago that didn't matter or mean anything, now you start releasing that stuff so it feeds into the narrative that you have created. This is classic intelligence operations. So this is how I see it. It looks like to me it is a massive takedown, attempted takedown of the president by the deep state and a deep state coup. It began probably with the DNC having their files downloaded by Seth Rich, who was later discovered and taken care of, if you know what I mean. And then everything after that was just building on it. Taking a look at, you know, the operation, saying, okay, we're here, you know, let's do this, let's do this. But once Trump was elected president and he beat their system, now they got an even bigger problem because all the things that they did could be discovered through investigations once Trump gets all of his people in place. So what they can't do is allow that to happen. So now they're in a really desperate situation and they must get rid of Trump before he has a chance to get all his people in there where they can actually discover the truth, where they will all be brought to justice and found out, all this stuff will be found out. So I believe that if we ever get to the bottom of it, and I think that will only happen if we get to hear from a lot of these witnesses under oath in a criminal proceeding. That would be Valerie Jarrett, Ben Rhodes, possibly Obama himself, Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, James Comey, John Brennan, certainly, because he was running the operations out of the CIA. Of course, the folks over at GPS. And of course, we know the people at GPS have been asked to testify. They do not want to for two reasons. Number one, because their lawyers have probably advised them that it would not be a good idea because they're probably going to be called either as witnesses or possibly as participants in the suit by Mr. Gubarev against Mr. Steele and against BuzzFeed. So his lawyers probably don't want anything going on there. They want him to shut up and see how that goes. But also because they're terrified that if they actually find themselves in front of in a real hearing where there's a real judge, a jury, where there's a real lawyer or a team of lawyers asking questions, or even if they show up in Congress and someone happens to ask a couple of good questions by accident, what we'd find out is that GPS Fusion was a lot more involved. They didn't just bring Christopher Steele in to put together the dossier. It wasn't just a one-off. GPS Fusion is intimately involved, deeply involved in the operations. They're involved much more than we know, and they are very, very closely connected to the Clintons, as is everyone else in this particular scenario. You look at every one of these people, whether it's CrowdStrike, whether it's Loretta Lynch, whether it's Comey, whether it's Brennan, all roads lead back to the Clintons. This is exactly what I think we're looking at. Fusion GPS, the role that they played. The same is true with our good friends over at CrowdStrike. They do not want to come and testify because they know the exact same thing, that questions may be asked which will disclose the fact that they were a lot more involved in things than they're letting on. And the reason they don't want those servers looked at is because it's very likely that if the FBI or someone else honest were to look at those servers, they would find that in fact there was no outside hack, that it was exactly as this forensicator tells us, is that these files were downloaded locally. And if that's found to be true by the FBI, after an analysis of the servers, it blows the entire Russia-Trump narrative out of the water, and it points the finger back at someone within the DNC as an inside job. And then you have to ask who could actually do something like this. And then you would actually have to say, well, someone who's pretty damn good. And you would come to the conclusion that the only people who are playing around with the DNC's servers for many years now, going all the way back to 2012, as has been proven, would be CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike are the people who could have set up the fake persona. They're the ones that could have gotten their hands on this fake Russian malware that they simply did copy and paste job on to make it look like it was another Russian intrusion, when in fact it was a false persona created by CrowdStrike to create this fake persona, who could then be used to leak what they wanted to leak, to discredit WikiLeaks, to discredit the things that Seth Rich was going to leak or would soon be published. Probably had already leaked them to WikiLeaks, but had not been published yet. So this is exactly what this operation looks like to me. It's all part of the deep state coup, and the point that when it first began, it was to try to win the election, to try to discredit Trump, to try to win the election. But now it's even a more desperate situation for them because they lost. And now it's more desperate for them because now what they're looking at is that they need to cover it up. They need to keep Trump and his people from being able to find the truth. That's why they need to analyze those servers. You have to ask yourself, why isn't Congress or the Attorney General or Uncle Bob's posse interested in looking at those servers? Everything we need to know that will open up the truth to this and open up all the questions I've asked today are to be found in the servers. That's where the evidence is. The FTP servers will tell you everything that you need to know about who did what. And apparently they don't want to get to the bottom of that because day after day after day goes by and you don't hear a single peep about someone wanting to take a look at those DNC servers. We've had months and months and months of hearings. We've heard from all kinds of people who want to talk all about Trump and Russia. They haven't been able to come up with anything, but yet we've not heard a single peep. We've not seen a single witness. Not Lynch, not Rhodes, not Rice, not Power, not Brennan, not Comey. None of them have actually had to sit in front of Congress and answer some questions. And when they're supposed to appear even behind closed session, they cancel. And what's done about it? Nada. Nothing. Looks like to me that the deep state's running the show and they want this thing to go away, and that what they have to do is they have to keep on the Trump-Russia narrative and keep unloading things that they probably have in the can to keep feeding the narrative, hoping to keep your mind off of the real issue we should be looking at, which is the deep state coup, the surveillance, and all the other operations that were going on. They want to delay that, put it off, make it go away, hope you forget about it, diminish it, and hope that the focus can turn onto Trump-Russia, and they can keep it there. And keep it there and keep it there to keep you distracted. But we're not going to let that happen. We're going to continue to stay on the story. And so this is basically my analysis. And again, just a note, I have about 10% of the information that we really need. We really need to see all these people that I just mentioned deposed in a court of law under oath. That's what we need to see. We need to hear from Fusion GPS. We need to find out who leaked the dossier to BuzzFeed. We need to find out who John McCain gave the dossier to. We know he probably spread it around in the Senate. We know he probably gave a copy to Harry Reid, because we have Harry Reid's 3 letters to the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Attorney General demanding that they have an investigation of this. So clearly Harry Reid got a copy of the dossier, or certainly talking points, from John McCain. He's the only one that could have done that. We need to find out from CrowdStrike. We need to find out from Fusion GPS what they have been up to, and we know it's a lot more than what's been alleged at this point. We need to find out a lot more from Samantha Power and Rice about what they unmasked, why they unmasked, what the probable cause was. We need to find out from Attorney General Lynch and Director Comey whether or not this meeting that was set up between Trump Jr. and the lawyer and her friend from the State Department and FBI, the translator, we need to find out, and their good friend Mr. Goldstone and all their other buddies, we need to find out if that was a setup. We need to find out if that meeting was the casus belli for getting the FISA warrant that was required to conduct the surveillance. Because let's face it, if you're sitting around and you're saying, yeah, well, we need to really be listening into Trump, we need to be conducting surveillance, yeah, you think we can get Obama to do it? And they probably sat around and talked to some people, and Lynch and Comey or whoever, and they probably said, yeah, we can do it, but we really need to have a reason. We need a cause, you know? If you can give us something, if you can give us Trump talking to a Russian, if you can give us Trump passing some cash in an envelope, if you can give us something. So what do? You create a situation like the Trump Jr. meeting with the Russian lawyer. It's exactly what you do. You get the reason. Now you have the reason for the FISA warrant, to give cover. But this is all being blown apart. Not just by me, but by many other people. So, anyway, this is my analysis of where we are today. Again, keep in mind, I'm only working with a small percentage of the facts. We need more facts. But once we get these facts, I think that when we get to the bottom of the barrel, we will find at least one thing for sure, that all roads lead back to the Clintons. This is a Clinton operation. The Clintons are behind it. Whether or not they'll actually ever be held accountable, I don't know. But there's a lot of other people that would and may have to fall on the sword. The only question is, will the Congress pursue it? Will Attorney General Jeff Sessions have the stones to do the right thing? Or will he be gone pretty soon and another Attorney General will come in who will have the stones to do it? These are the only questions, folks. It's not a question of whether or not we can get to the truth. We certainly can. We just need people with the will to do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been TowerGate Day 139, Saturday evening. You'll be watching this video, I assume, on Sunday morning. It'll take several hours to upload. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate the comments and all your support. And please feel free to join in the comments section and offer your opinion on my analysis. If you think I'm wrong, tell me. If you have something else to add, please add it. I would love to read it. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you tomorrow night. Bye.